It looks like we're good to go right now. So let's try this again. I'll just make sure that it doesn't turn off on us again. But hi everyone, I'm Sam. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the founder of the Conscious Altruism Movement. I love doing a bunch of advocacy work, bridging awareness of all of the different things within the DEI realms. And I like to kind of embed my spirituality within it, as well as use of tarot in a lot of the things that I do. So I'm here with Lori today. So Lori, if you'd like to introduce yourself,
Hi, I am Lori Sheffer. I live here in New York with my wife, two dogs and a cat. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm old enough that I'm still learning to get used to that because most of my lifetime that was not something we did.
yeah.
Uh, I have spent the last couple of years full time as a shamanic practitioner and a medium. I call myself a shamanic medium. Before that, I was a special education teacher with kids on the spectrum and with emotional issues. And then before that, I worked in HIV/AIDS and all sorts of different roles. So I've really had a lifetime of helping others, and I enjoy being an advocate for people, and I really love the spirituality piece. I believe it's always been a piece of me, but now I get to do that 100%, and that is a really cool thing.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to chat with you. And Androgeny looks like he'll be joining us soon, switching laptops there. I think there's something happening with all the planets or something, but the technology has been a bit of a challenge. I don't know if you've noticed the same thing, but it's just very spotty. Yes, but one of the topics that I prepared for us today, just to get things going, and of course we can take this wherever we feel like going, but to chat a little bit about our journeys with being seen. So, obviously with yourself, and you can talk maybe a little bit more about what happened with your journey on TikTok, for example, is a great one. And maybe you want to talk a little bit about your journey of your spiritual practices and how that looked for you. And then for myself, obviously the show that Ozzy and I were on is a version of being seen, but also what I've been kind of doing with my social media lately, which is going outside of the box of what I was doing before, talking about things that are a little bit more considered controversial. So, yeah, like maybe we can even start with where you were at with this journey, maybe even 5, 10 years ago. How was it for you as you were maybe even considering going on to something like social media and talking about anything?
5, 10 years ago, social media would not have occurred to me. I had my Facebook and
Yeah.
when I think about 15 years ago, what the social media I was on was really because I was raising kids, teenagers, and so I needed to understand social media because I had kids, and then I realized, oh, I like this. I'd like to do that, but really putting myself out there and being seen and having a bigger presence was not something that I was really looking for. And that's been part of my spiritual journey. I think a big piece in this lifetime with my soul is allowing myself to what does it mean to be seen, and to also to it's more than being seen, isn't it? It's to be engaged. Right? It's to be engaged on a larger, I mean, use the term platform just because that's a word we use now, but it's frightening because all those old fears come up, like you think about those basic ones from my childhood. Will I be liked? Will someone criticize me? All those things really come to the forefront, and then you got the family factor. How will my family feel about this? And all those things, all those parts of us that may contain traumas, that it's so much easier to be invisible or to be small in that way. You can make a large presence and be so-called small and to not have like a lot of people in your life, but when you allow yourself to really broaden, it can be very frightening because now there are people who aren't in your day-to-day life who can make comments on you, who it can be really scary.
Yeah. And I think even for myself, growing up, I always had that feeling of I had a lot of what I called unpopular opinions, or I always felt or recognized that I saw the world differently, or the way that people would interpret experiences, I would see them just very different. And I think at the same time, I kind of learned to not say those things out loud or in a space that wasn't just somebody who was really close to me or that I could share those things with. And I just didn't talk about it in public. And that was in any sense with people I didn't really know. It was always just that being agreeable or whatever it is, right? And to not have to get into this, it's not even an argument, but just not seeing eye to eye and like going back and forth and everyone's trying to like, give their opinion or whatever it is, but it's not necessarily constructive. And so I feel like even with social media, I'm starting out, it was very like on the surface and it was very people show their dogs or like a game that they went to and maybe a couple family pictures here and there. But more recently is when I started to just dip my toes in with things that were a little bit more yeah, like I said, controversial or things that people don't really post a lot about. And I felt so many feelings doing that. And it was the scariest thing. And all those things definitely are like, yeah, who's gonna not like me anymore? Or who's gonna
Yeah.
disagree? What kind of pushback am I gonna get? What am I gonna have to deal with? And what are people gonna think of me? But it was really just like exercising that muscle. And then now I'm like, all right, I'll talk about anything.
Yeah, it's so
I'm
funny because
fine.
when Daria, when I started on TikTok last year, it started very small, and it started out just with my wanting to get my mediumship practice out, and then I want more, people, more followers, and so that's when I said to my wife, Daria, I says, hey, come on and join me on this, so let's do some stuff, and then suddenly with Daria and I on together, we had no clue, we were not expecting what happened to happen at all, and of course my wife is not technological. She doesn't really enjoy social media, and I sort of dragged her into it. But she is like, you know, um, she's funny. She loves being funny, and she has all this stuff. So it was a natural fit for us to go on TikTok. And what happened was suddenly. I think we have like 42,000 followers, and I've been off for a couple months, and it was shocking to us. And what was more shocking is people cared about what we had to say. We would do silly little things about us as a couple, and then I would do stuff alone as a medium. And we were stunned. But in the process of this, at first, we stayed we shared our story, but we also stayed like superficial. So anything that was like deeper, that was, I don't know, maybe controversial, but more shared those deeper parts of ourselves, we sort of stayed away from. And like one of those had to do, we didn't do a video on this because it had to do with that childhood, like having children conversation, and what that meant to us and how hard that was. One wanted a kid and one didn't. And Darius says, I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be judged on TikTok. And I thought, well, that's not really fair. A person should be able to really share themselves and not be judged because someone else thinks it should be differently. And that is the hardest part, because you hear so many stories about people being, attacked and or all the stuff that goes into it. So it makes you want to stay away from it and getting to that point that you're like, I'm going to do this anyway. It takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, and Androgeny, you can introduce yourself first as well, but I'm so curious because you're like right in the middle of your journey of being seen and starting to put more video content out there and showing your face. Like, yeah, like how's that going for you?
Oh gosh. Well, first, what do you want me to say for this introduction? 'Cause,
Well, welcome. No, you can introduce yourself in however you want, what you do, kind of, yeah, just whatever
oh,
feels right.
okay. Well, as I tell people when I meet them, my name is I am the self-love panor, the androgynous one, androgyny angel. I am a self love educator, and that entitles me educating and guiding and teaching people how to love themselves in an authentic and in an authentic way. And so, in some cases, when I teach, I utilize music, I utilize Reiki, I utilize um movies and TV. I utilize all this different stuff to help teach people how to love themselves. So that's me. Um, as far as me being on social media and being and putting myself out there, I'm still uncomfortable. I'm at the beginning stages of it. And it's very nerve-wracking, especially hearing Lori talking about how people judge individuals out there based upon a certain opinion. And it is nerve-wracking for me, but at this point, I'm kind of like two tears in a bucket, so fuck it. It's either you love me or you love to hate me.
Mhm.
Either way, half the dozen, you still love me and I'm still paying, I'm still rent-free in your brain. So now it's just forcing myself to get out of my shell. I can't help it. I am a Cancer through and throughout. I have my first four planets are in Cancer. So I have to get used to and force myself to get out of my shell to be in the limelight at this point now. I'm used to it when I go to the different stores where I teach myself love classes at. But it's a whole nother ball game when you're doing it on YouTube, when you're
Mhm.
doing it on TikTok, when you're doing it on Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's an adjustment period.
yeah. I,
Um, Go ahead.
I know. I was just going to say because you think about face-to-face contact involves eye contact, involves this, you're in the same room with someone, and so you can read them. There are things you can do. You can work with that energy, but
Mhm.
you're out there in a way that there is no interaction, right? There is not like that. People put in their comments, but it's not like they're physically interacting with you, and that's very different. And as you were talking androgyny, I was thinking about, after I came out publicly. I think it was like 24, and I joined the gay and lesbian group at the student union Michigan State, and I immediately got involved with going around to Michigan State's huge, and I went around to all the dormitories and I did gay and lesbian things. I not only that, I was interviewed, I was on shows. I mean, even when I got to New York, I would go to places, and I don't know where they are now, but there would be some with me on back then when you'd be interviewed with a whole group of people, panels. I did panel things, all those sort of things without a problem. And I understood that you're not, especially that we're talking the 80s and the early 90s, and I worked in AIDS, and I got it, and I was very confident with the fact that you might not like me, or like my message. And when I worked in HIV, in those days, I would go to parties and people would walk on the other side of the room from me and not even stand near me, because if I'm working with AIDS, I must have AIDS, or all these sort of things. And I got comfortable with what you're talking about, androgyny, with just like, I don't care. I'm very passionate about who I am and what I am, and I want to educate people and help people to become more comfortable. And that's always been a big piece of me, to help others to overcome their uncomfortableness with me, or with what I'm talking about, or with AIDS, back then. And but when it got to technology, it was interesting. It was a little bit harder for me and scarier for me. And I think it's because it's just out there, and you can't connect with someone, when I'm working with a huge audience in person, um, I can help them because I'm in the room with them, but it's so much harder this way.
And
You
it's
know, I think
interesting.
about my, go ahead.
I was going to say it's interesting too, because for me, growing up, I was always in performance arts. And so since I was in kindergarten, I was performing on stages, but it was never speaking. So for years and years, I was pretty used to getting up on stages and being in front of people. And it was always scary because, even as a kid, you're always like freaking out right before you go on stage, thinking that you forgot everything you were supposed to do on the stage. And it's just one of those things, but I got so used to it. And then eventually, when it came to speaking, it was one of those things that I was just like so scared to do it. And I would almost be like shaking, but then it is something in a sense you do have to kind of force yourself to get out of that comfort zone. And then once you do it enough, it's like, okay, I can do this. It's not so bad. Or, when you just finally remember everyone's human, you're like, everyone else is pretty nervous too that hasn't really done this before. And then there's like less pressure on the self to have to perform perfectly. Because I would think to myself, if this person goes up there and they make a little bit of a mistake, I don't judge them. You just kind of like, you notice it for that second and then it's out of your mind. So I'm like, so why should I think that people are just thinking about my mistakes, for like the whole hour? They're really not.
Right. Right.
You know, I'm thinking of two different things. I'm thinking about what my mother used to say, because my mom she was a computer engineer. And so back in the 80s, she knew about the internet. And she's like, okay, this is something completely different. And it has some good points, but it has some bad points. And so I think about sometimes when I do Zooms or different types of lives, I think about, okay, whatever I say, it's out there.
Mhm.
It's out there. You can't take it back. And just just be prepared if it comes back to you years down the road. And I constantly think about that. And then I also think about, as a kid, I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to go to Hollywood. I wanted to be, on the TV shows, on the movie screens and all of that. And as I got older and life kept going, those dreams dwindled away. And so now I'm really thinking like, okay, they didn't dwindle away. I may not be an actor, but I'm about to be, out there. I'm about to be on TV. I may not be on movie screens, but yeah, I'm not going to say that. I might be. Let's just see, a guest role or something. But I'm really thinking like, oh, wow, why are you scared when this is what you wanted? You wanted this since you was a kid. Now that you thought it was gone, and now that it's starting to surface back up and it's starting to come into your reality, now you're getting nervous and now you're getting scared. And it's like, okay, it's okay. It's okay. You're fine. But it's just something you got to get used to.
Mhm.
I haven't been on stage since middle school. I haven't been on stage, yeah, since middle school, eighth grade. And it's nerve wracking. That's all I can say. It's nerve wracking. Um, but it's just something that you just have to force yourself. You have to put yourself out there. If you say something stupid, then you say something stupid. It's not the end of the dang on world. If it comes back to haunt you, well, it can't come back to haunt you if hey, yeah, I said that, and
Mhm.
it's one of
Yeah.
those things.
And I think, I was listening to you guys, and I go back to high school, we're talking the 70s, and I think there was always, after I took my very first speech class in the 10th grade, and I learned to speak in front of others, and I learned to do all that. At first, that was really rough. There is a piece in me that I think I was definitely born into this lifetime with it, that I will always I'm okay with bringing up the uncomfortable subjects. I mean, I think I was a senior in high school in 1979, and we were given topics we got to present that are controversial. 1979, what do I choose? Incest, right? And no one's talking about incest in 1979. Me, there I go. And it's like, and or abortion. At that time there was some big abortion case that was out there, and it's very interesting that I was always that little bit of a rebel. Now because of the culture I was in, my friends knew I was gay way before I did, because it was like I just wasn't ready yet. And my family, like, it's almost like they fixed it so the words were never said around me. It's like I never heard those things. I never even, knew that much about gay people because it was kept from me, but I was still controversial in all these other ways. And then once I realized, because what happens is, and we can really connect that to the queer component within us, is that fear of not being accepted, that fear of not being loved, and then all these other traumas that we've had in our life, whether we were bullied or all those other things, have taught us keep it in. Don't be showing who you are, because then you become a target. And this is way before the internet. And so now the internet comes along and you think you've conquered this, and you're like, oh, here's the internet. Oh my God, this is really scary. It's one thing to flub when you're in a with a group of people in person, but or not even flub, when you say something that someone takes out of context, or with me, I say the wrong words, it's like my brain misfires and the wrong word comes out. It just does. Well, I'm sorry, I'll fix it. You tell me and I'll fix it. We all do that. But yet things get blown so out of proportion that piece of putting yourself out there becomes scary too.
And I think for me, it's also been learning how to get more in touch with my intuition too, right? Where it's like, oh, do I feel called to talk about this, or am I feeling it because of another reason? Am I feeling reactive? Am I feeling like I need to respond? Like, what's going on? And that's kind of helped me, because one of the things I was very scared about with having a lot more followers or just being more visible, right? It's almost like every little thing you do or say is now being seen by more people, and you're opening yourself up to more and more potential criticism. And what I also found is there is definitely like an energetic aspect to it, right? Because I feel like one significant thing for me was when I started posting more things about politics, around like real life stuff that's happening, and not just putting some funny little thing, or just like different type of things, like deeper, like let's get people to think type of stuff. I did noticeably start losing a lot of followers, and in the beginning that definitely feels like that attack, right? Of like, they don't like me, they don't like what I'm saying, like everyone's just gonna stop following me. But really, it just feels like that group is just getting more and more refined and more aligned and more in touch and in tune. And I'm not seeing the type of hate that I would see elsewhere, but I'm seeing constructive conversations. I'm seeing
Yeah.
people express things that they wouldn't feel comfortable saying anywhere else, right? And so I'm not really seeing a lot of that, but I'm also trying to do my part of like not engaging in a way that will draw in more of that kind of energy. And it's been serving me well so far. I mean, I can't speak for the future, but up until now, it's been pleasant.
I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking, and I'm getting downloads and messages and all of that. And I'm really thinking, you know what? When it comes to being out there, of course, there's going to be someone that's not going to like what you say. There's going to be someone that's not going to like how you think, how you look, how you speak, whatever the case may be. And the moment they go ahead and say what they say, and then they go back into their hiding, and then you never hear from them again, one, it's a test for you. How tough is your shell? How tough is that skin of yours? And two, it, like you said, it's refining. So it's taking out all of the people that are not, quote unquote, your soul tribe. And as they leave, your soul tribe is coming in. And they'll come in droves of like 10 compared to that one person that just left. So for every one person that left, 10 people are coming in. And that's one thing I have to remind myself, because I am extremely sensitive when it comes to criticism. And that's just because there's some trauma that I'm still working through when it comes to criticism within my own family unit. And it's just one of those things where it's like, you know what? They're criticizing because you triggered them. You triggered them based upon what you said, and it's making them think outside of the box. And they don't like to think outside of the box. They like to keep themselves in their box where everything is quote unquote normal. And it's the way it's supposed to be in their eyes. And so one thing that I am working on is, you know what? I know I don't like to trigger people, but I know I do. And with the work that I do, I have to trigger people. So it's more of, you know what? Bump it. Just trigger them. Just trigger them. It's okay. Just go ahead and trigger the folks. Because that's the only way that you're going to get used to it. And that is the only way for them to go on their healing journey. So it's okay. Trigger away. Be trigger happy for all I care.
I'm just thinking about, and well, two things. Well, I think about Derry and I, when we were coming to a place where I never was in the closet, so to speak. Once I came out, I mean, my gosh, I went all over the place and I did the things I did. And Daria was a teacher, and at that time she could lose her license, her teaching license, because it was morality clause. So we were a little cautious, but we always knew the one thing about us, like no matter where we went, if you really were even not paying attention, after a while you could figure out that we were together, because we're just, in some ways, we didn't hide our affection for each other, not like hand holding or anything, that fine line, because of the generation we're from. You didn't hold hands in public because it could make you a physical attack. Someone could physically attack you. So it's one thing to trigger someone, to help them to think differently, or to do that, but it's another thing to trigger someone who now is going to physically harm you, right? There is a difference. And and that was a real teaching for us, is and where our line in the sand was, how far we were willing to go with that. And it's the line has changed, but it's not. Sometimes it's still the same. But so for us, because of the trauma over, and I think that still exists for everybody, but I think it's like trying to find that line. I think I'm learning now to move it where I'm more comfortable putting myself more out there. I always was, but I think it changes with the internet. But I also I want to believe the best out of everyone. And I want to believe that everyone, you don't have to believe what I believe, and you don't even have to, it's just that the fact that we all get to exist, I'm not asking you to believe what I believe, but to have compassion so that I can, live my life and you live your life, and we do coexist in the same planet, in the same, all this stuff. And that to me is a piece of, I think, the teachings that come forth. I think for me to bring forth is how do we do that? How do we be good human beings with each other, good spiritual beings with each other, and we don't have to believe the same. And it's that respect piece, and that's the piece, and that's why I think spirit for me has called me to this next thing. And because a piece of it is living my life to, certainly not perfect, but doing the best I can, to at least show myself that I'm willing to do the work in all my humanness. I'm willing to do my work, and that, and sort of then calling on others to bring in their humanness to do the same.
And something that's coming to me is I know, Laura, you don't follow this quite as much, but astrology wise, in my natal chart, I have my Chiron, I believe, and my Jupiter both in the sign of Cancer. And so that's where that kind of emotional depth for me is very, very challenging. But then I also see a great amount of expansion when I'm kind of going to those emotional depths. And so for me, when it comes to like the vulnerabilities of putting ourselves out there, right? A lot of what I've personally gotten from it is actually going there with those emotions of, oh, I feel very attacked by this, or this makes me feel very angry, or I'm very heated inside, or, I want to be very reactive. But it's within the noticing and sitting with those feelings that I've gotten some amazing things out of them, and healing that has happened where I'm like, okay, like I felt so attacked in that moment, but then I come to my clarity of, oh yeah, that's not me. This part is me, but then that is all them, right? Like that is their thing. So like
Right.
androgyny, as you were talking, I'm like, yeah, I know that I trigger a lot of people, and some people are willing to move towards. Some people can have those conversations, or for some people, they also book readings with me because they're ready to go there, right? And then the ones who leave, because they can't, they're just not ready, they have a block there still, and that's fine. But they're going on that journey and they can't unsee or unhear whatever it was that made them click unfollow or whatever it is. But I've personally kind of just gained so much from it in the putting myself out there and the vulnerability of literally anybody saying anything they want to say from anywhere in the world, and then yeah, just hiding away after that.
And Sam, what you brought up was interesting because, part of me, I just I used to want to know everything. I just can't hold it. Like astrology, I can't, like I can try, but I can't, it's like my brain just won't hold it. And so I realized that about some things, that in this current moment, it's like my brain just can't hold all this information, because then I worry, and I think that's the teacher in me, that well, if I don't know it exactly, if I don't know it fully, then I can't speak on it, right? And that's that teacher aspect of me. And so it's that piece, and I used to try so hard to learn all these things, and about 5 or 6 years ago spirit said to me, stop. I want you to stop feeling like you've got to read all these different things to know all this information. And it's been more of an intuitive journey for me at this time. And I don't, I so respect the astrology piece and all this information, but it's hard for me when I'm doing stuff with others, because sometimes I'm like, and that's like even with what I really am good at, the shamanic components and the mediumship, I'll say, well, you haven't studied long enough, you haven't, to keep myself from going out and doing classes. Oh, you're just, no, you can't go that yet. What right do you have to do that? And then, spirit speaks to me and says, well, that's what I want from you. That's what I want from you. Everything you've ever been in this lifetime is what I want you to do now with this. So get out of your own ego, because it is ego, and let go of that. It's okay. You don't need to know all of it. There are lots of people in this world who have little pieces. And so, so I can let go. I can respect the person who knows astrology, and they'll guide me and tell me where I'm going with the stars. But speaking of the stars, the beautiful kettle, the shamanic, my lineage, they, believe they come from the Pleiades. So I can bring in this other whole aspect within me. That's my, and I don't even need to know all the details. It's just channeling through me.
You
I want
know,
Go ahead, Androgeny.
You, so you had to mention the whole teacher aspect. And I taught pre-K, so I understand exactly what you are saying. And I instantly thought about, okay, that's that inner saboteur. That is that inner saboteur. And that is, in some cases, like the perfectionist. Because as a teacher, as an educator, that's your job, is to educate people on correct information. And if we don't have the information, if we didn't study the information, how are we supposed to teach it to someone else? And I've learned that, you know what, you just have to go with it. There's things that I do talk about that I'm currently going through and I don't have the answers to. And it's something about talking about it, and then all of a sudden you're getting these downloads, you're getting these messages, and then in the midst of you talking about it, that's when you grasp on, like, okay, I got it. And it's about being okay with that, accepting that portion. I still don't know everything that I want to know about astrology, but I know just just enough to get my points across. And sometimes that's all it takes. It's just that little bit so you can get your point across. Go ahead, Sam.
Oh, no, that's so true. Mine was more of a side note because Lori, when you mentioned the Pleiadians, I did a tarot exchange maybe a week ago, and the Pleiadians that was something that came through in the reading for me. So when you said that, I'm like, of course you said that. But apparently they have a message for me or something. So maybe it's from you.
It's so funny. I was just talking to a friend about this. In this work, I remember I was going through a massive trauma in 2010. So I started this 16-month like, it was much more than a training. It was a healing process, right? And I really was coming in cold. I mean, I had taken a few things but I didn't understand many things. Astrology, knew nothing about it, or even light language. I mean, so many things I had never just heard of. So I remember the first time that someone used light language around me, right? And this is a lot, back then I'm going, and this goes to what we were just speaking about before. I'm going, what the heck was that? I'm going, and I'm sitting with a friend of mine who's also first time. We're looking at each other going, where are we? It was just so funny, right? And now I look at that and I'm a little like, oh, and now, because I get it, and and because I channel sound and things come through, but it was a process. And so instead of saying, oh, I can't handle this, I'm leaving the room, this is absolutely, I was uncomfortable in it, and it definitely was at the time weird. And then it was, but I got, I allowed it, and I says, you're gonna allow this, because what am I allowing? I'm allowing myself to sit with it. I'm allowing myself to say, this is uncomfortable, I don't understand it, it's way out of anything I've ever experienced, but I'm not going to discount it. And that was the thing. And that's really where I think I try to come at things, I try to meet people at, and then I ask them to try to meet me at the same place, and that's it. And then we can all share from there. And it's like the first time I brought in, I didn't see it as an alien. I called it more like a universal into a reading. Even I said to myself, I'm like, in my head, I'm going, are you making this up? Where does this come from? And then I tell the person, and they go, oh my God, that's exactly how I see them, and the whole thing. And I'm going, okay, all right. And that's where I then got my philosophy of never doubting, when the information, just don't doubt it. But yeah, there are times when I will be bringing information for someone and I'll go, that's a little wacky. You sure? Yeah, and but I never doubt. I just bring it in. And that is it, isn't it? It's that trust. It's that trust. And that's sort of where I'm at, is that even on this, on the internet and all this, it's the trust. It's the absolute faith that I'm where I'm supposed to be, and I'm doing my best.
Don't you just love it when you go ahead and you do readings and there's something brand spanking new comes to you like, wait, what? And you're trying to process this at the same time. Don't you love it when that happens?
Oh yeah. And even in tarot readings too, I had that so many times where I'm just like, I don't know why this is coming through in this way or what this means. But when I was taking my tarot certification program, one thing I'm so grateful that particular teacher taught was about that part where we could be keeping somebody from something that they really needed by judging the information that comes through. So if it comes through and you're just saying like, oh no, that doesn't make sense, or that's bad news, that could be the best news that they've heard all week, and you just judged it as bad, and now they're
Mhm.
not getting that message from them. So since then, I'm always like, no matter how it sounds or looks to me, like I'm gonna say it because it's not for me, it's for them.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, I
yeah.
just I think about Whoopi Goldberg and Ghost. Molly, you in danger, girl. That's what I think about. Because even when I would do oracle readings, yeah, I'm going ahead and all different types of, you know how you have on Facebook, you have all of these different free,
Yeah,
oracle
yeah.
tarot reading groups and all of that. And it's just it's amazing. That's all I can say. It's amazing. It's like I said, it's nerve-wracking, but it's amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, the
just
very first time I went to a medium, I'll never forget. So I was, information was starting to come in for me. I just wasn't ready for it. I couldn't handle it. It was like I never asked to be a medium, doggone it. And but I go finally to go see a medium, and at first I'm like, she tells me stuff, and I'm like, I don't really believe you. And then she says something that there's just no way. There's just no way she could have even have guessed that particular thing. So I left that session going, wow, she hit something really on the head, and she couldn't have known that. And that was really, so you think of these openings in your life where now it's like, okay, I don't have to understand it. And I don't have to understand it, but I feel it, and I know it's valid for me. And it, and for me, I think there was always this piece of me that was very logical. I tried to stay logical, like, boy, ask me to arrange a space. I'm very spatial. I can put a trunk together, put stuff in a trunk for a travel or a trip in a minute. Very spatial and very logical, but a lot of this stuff isn't logical. And so, this path that I've chosen to take and put myself out there, there's this part of my brain that says, I don't get it. Why are you doing that? But other part of me says, yes, this is exactly what you should be doing. And now that takes up most of the space. I believe it with all my heart.
one thing I learned, especially during oracle readings, you can't be logical. You can't be logical all the times. There's a time and a space to be logical. Um, building a house. Okay, that's the time to be logical. Um, driving a car. That's the time to be logical. But you don't have to be all the time. And that's one thing I learned through doing readings is, what, there are things that are out there that you could only fathom. And when you see it, just go with the flow. Go with the flow, because the more you try to think about it, the more you try to be logical about it, the harder it is for you to comprehend it. So sometimes that logic mess, it has to go out the window in order for you to comprehend everything that is going on.
Oh, yeah. And even a lot of times I feel like I like to remind people too of like when we hear all those buzzwords all the time, right? Of like ease and flow and all of those things. And I'm like, at the same time, though, sometimes flow has lots and lots of challenges, but you're still in flow. You're just going up to those challenges because that's the thing that you were needing, or, there was a lesson in it for you, or some healing moment, or whatever it is that sometimes it's like we're told that everything has to be like totally effortless, and that's when you're in flow. But it's like, I've been in so much flow and I've just hit barrier after barrier, but I got something so good out of each of those barriers, each of those challenges. And like that's what I feel like flow is. Like, even if something doesn't make sense, like, oh, that doesn't seem easy, but like that is the easiest thing for you in that moment.
Yeah.
You know,
And
I,
the not questioning. I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh
Yeah.
no, go ahead, Lori.
Oh, I was going to say, it reminds me of, as a special ed teacher, I worked with, neurodiverse kids on the spectrum and seventh and eighth grade, and the anxiety and the fears. And oftentimes they would just get frozen and they wouldn't be able to move forward. There was no flow. They're just, they couldn't. The doubt, or even like all the logic is just flowing into them, all the information, and they just are frozen. And so I would stand up there. And this is great. I loved teaching in a small classroom with like that because I could just be totally authentically me. There were no cameras. That was good. No, but yeah. So one of those Christmas shows, which one? Santa Claus is Coming to Town, mainly the one where the wizard and he goes, put one foot in
In
front
front
of
of
the
the
other,
other.
and soon you'll be walking out the door. All right, and I would start to sing this, and the kids would just crack up. I says, guys, we don't worry about it. It's okay. That's part of learning is making mistakes. It's okay. Let's just do it, and let's laugh. Let's be goofy, and that's really, in those years I spent like doing that with the kids. It really, they were my biggest teachers because the fears that they would overcome, and there's it doesn't have to be a perfect step. It's just keep moving those feet, keep moving, keep that flow going. That's all it is. And it can be herky jerky. It doesn't matter as long as you're going, and that's what counts.
I think about a roller coaster. A roller coaster is always in flow. It always goes exactly the way it's supposed to go. But think about it when you're going up the hill. It's so slow and it's jerky. And then whoosh. So when it comes to, what you were saying, Sam, when it comes to flow, yes, flow is going to have, challenges. Flow is going to have its surprises. Flow is going to sometimes it's gonna have to knock the mess out of you, you know. But flow is always gonna get to where flow need to be. And I'm looking at you, Lori, and I'm thinking about you were singing Santa Claus Coming to Town. I would sing, there's a couple songs I used to sing. One of them was Diana Ross theme song to Mahogany. Do you know where you're going to? Do you like the things that life is showing you? Where are you going to? Do you know? And I used to play that song to wake up the kids. And when I say I would lip sync for my life, like I was on RuPaul's Drag Race. I was lip syncing for my life. And it was and the funny thing is the kids gradually learned the song. And hopefully, with that little seed that I planted in my babies, they'll remember that song and they'll ask themselves those questions as they get older.
Yeah. I feel like that was just one of those things, Androgeny, where we're like, what do we say after that?
Right, right. Well, I think that that's what it is, and it's just,
So
and
good.
that's where the trust comes in. We learn to trust ourselves more and more, and it's, and I, when I first became a medium, an active medium where I was reading for others, it started out with realizing that, and I'm sure some teacher told me this and I just owned it, is that it's about, for the messages to really come in, you have to have faith in them. You have to have faith, and not, if you stop yourself and say, okay, are you sure? Are you sure? Yeah, and it's like in that whole thing with spirit, with that connection, and then of course you always want a little bit of discernment, but it's like just bringing it in that total trust. And what I realized was that faith that I began to really have in my space where I did my readings. I began to realize, you don't just have that in there, that's everywhere. That is in me too. I have to have faith in myself. I have to have faith in me, and that is that in trust in myself, that I've been through a lot in this life, and I've been guided, and so I have to trust that the words that come out of me, I got to be my best, self. That doesn't mean my perfect self, and that doesn't mean from one day to the other that doesn't change. Some days I'm real cranky, and in those days I'll keep a low visibility, but it's like the idea that we can only be our best version of ourselves for what it is in that moment, and then share that with the world.
And then what's perfect?
Exactly.
What's perfect is like what's normal.
One of the things I tell Aussie too is we can never really be on our wrong path. Like there is really no right or wrong path, because if there were a right or wrong path, people who are not tuned in would not be in their flow. Like they would not be doing these amazing things. So if people who are totally just like unaware on a conscious level of their connection, like they wouldn't be able to do it. So it's not about always needing to be so consciously connected all the time and like, am I doing the right thing? There is no wrong thing. We're either gonna be on that like that dip of the roller coaster, or we're gonna be learning a lesson, or we're gonna be meeting someone we needed to meet, or having an experience that's gonna serve us from either our past or our futures. And so there is no getting it wrong.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this journey that we've been on, many lifetimes, but for this lifetime, that we've had experiences that have led us to, traumas, to questioning, to all these things. And I've used this one before, but it's the idea. I remember a job I worked at, and my boss saying to me, Lori, I need to talk to you for a moment. Can you come to my office? And right away, the negative thoughts just come flying. Oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. Oh my God, this is it. It's like, I'm going to be found out, and it was crazy. And she just wanted to share information with me, but it was so, it literally froze me. I couldn't function for a moment, and it took me a moment to get out of that. And I understood that, okay, when I go back in time, there were some things that have happened to me to make that a valid feeling for me. And so, to allow myself to say, okay, this was valid at one point, but now look what it's doing to you. And what can that lead to? It can lead to me saying words I shouldn't say, or becoming defensive where I don't need to be. And those are the things. And so, and part of the flow is also the energy within us. And it's allowing the energy, and when you feel it getting stuck, when we get to a point, we can't always do this, but when we get to a point where we can be conscious of it, and then allowing ourselves now to work it through, however, with our breath or whatever that is, or just be, I see you. I see you. I know what this is. And then moving through it. And that's all part of flowing, is, it's all the work that goes into it.
Is that androgyny?
No, I know you had something to say. Go
Oh no,
ahead.
I'm good. You've had something to say for a little while. Go for it.
And to be honest, I have a brain fart, so I can't think of it right now.
Yeah. Well,
So yeah.
androgyny, you take in your little ones that you worked with. It's interesting because you worked with the pre-K and I worked with seventh and eighth grade. And I worked at the last 10 years of my teaching career at a very special school for kids that could no longer make it in public school. And they came to us so loaded with traumas and so loaded with so many things that they doubted themselves. Like, and these could be kids who were very bright, but they would also, if they're on the spectrum and stuff, get really stuck in it. But it's like when the little ones, you think about, some of them are so confident, right? Some of them have no fear, they have nothing. Others have already began to doubt. And I think it's such, there's so much you can learn from working with that very young age.
The very first the very first job that I had was at a daycare center that hired me as a teacher's assistant. And I had a student that watched their father try to drown their mother in the bathtub. So right off the bat, I'm hit with a child who has dealt with abuse, and I have no clue what to do. I have no clue. I went to my director, I went to my assistant director, I went to other teachers, and they could not help me. They just looked at this little boy as a lost cause. And it's like, well, why are y'all even considering him as a lost cause? He's only 4 years old. His life is just beginning. What is y'all doing? And it was one particular teacher that I had to talk to that he had the year before. And she was the one who helped me out. She was the one who said, okay, this is what you do. And go talk to his mother. Go talk to his mother and figure out what it is that you guys can do. Because the director and the assistant director, they wasn't trying to deal with her. And in that one job, I learned that, you know what? There are lots of people that are in the education field that shouldn't be in the education field. And I think that's why I stayed in it for so long. But I have had experience from that. I had experience with children who were just peaches and cream and lollipops, had the perfect life. I've had students whose parents have came up to me and said, hey, my baby is transgender. I got a lesbian child, I got a straight child, and I got a transgender child. My child is constantly saying that he's a boy. And that's what he is. So we just need to know, are you okay with that? Because if you're not, then we're going to have to go to some other school. I don't care. Kids know more about themselves than grown adults. That's what I've learned. Especially at that age, they're still aware of the other side.
Mm-hmm.
They're still aware of the spiritual realms. So they know themselves better than what a 72-year-old man would know about themselves. They know more about themselves than a 25-year-old person. And what I've learned is that, you know what? We got to start teaching these babies, you know who you are. Stop teaching them, oh, you have to figure out who you are. No, they already know.
Right, right. And it's fluid. As a matter of fact, that's the other thing. It's the idea that there's, especially as a kid, it's like you don't need to, it's like even us, it's like there is a fluidity to life. And I mean that in a very positive way, that part of especially being a kid is being, if you're lucky enough, because some of us weren't, to be being given a framework where it's okay to to not know who you are, to try new things. And and as a someone who parented other people's children, but parented, I think one of the struggles was, I remember when the child we had with us was doing sports, and because we're putting money out, we're saying, okay, listen, if I'm going to put money into basketball, then you're going to complete the season. I don't care if you continue, but now 3 weeks in, they say, but I don't like it. And then I say, because this is often the classic parent response, but I just paid for this. And you've committed yourself to the team. And so this is the expectation. And it's interesting because both sides have, both sides, there's something there. And it's hard because I think this is what kids are going through, right? It's like those two sides. But you said, I get to follow my own path, but now you're saying to me I don't. And and you're saying, well, but then as a parent, I'm saying, yeah, but I only have so much money. Right? And so it's so difficult. And I think it's just that. And then, so what do we do as adults? Do we, beat ourselves up for it later on and say, oh, I could have done that better? Or we just say, I really was doing the best I could with what I had. And I think, that's it. And none of us are perfect. Our parents, look at our parents, I know there was a lot of not perfect, but I think they really were trying the best they could with what they had.
There's no, and I don't have no physical children at all right now. Keyword right now. But I even know, okay, there's no handbook.
Right.
They were not given, your parents was not given a handbook. One shoe was out here and outside the womb. Okay, here's your handbook. This is gonna have everything that you're gonna need, how to raise your child, and this is that and the other. Your grandparents didn't have all of that. You know what? I just thought of something. Oh wow. Let me 86 what I just said. There's no physical handbook. The handbook is all internal. In order to access that internal handbook, you have to start healing yourself. Yep, that's it. That's it.
And you
That's it.
think back in that, you're right. But well, like if we're doing it the same way our grandparents did it, like, I think that's what it is. And you look at that. I remember when my wife and I were raising one of the kids we were raising, and she said, well, this is what my dad did, and we were just discussing this. And yeah, he did. He was a doctor, and he believed his word was law at all times. And if he snapped his fingers, he expected you to comply, and there was no room for it to not go that way. And that law was the law. But it also created a box which you were supposed to function in. And if you weren't functioning in that box, then you were the one with the problem, not him, because he had all the answers. And the problem is that box doesn't fit for everyone. But he was thinking that's how his father raised him. So when do we stop and say, okay, we've got to stop? And that's when we work with our ancestors. That's when we say, something's not working here. I respect my parents. They did the best they can, my grandparents, but we need to make some changes because there needs to be some shifts. And with all that love and respect, it's time to put some healing into that so we can now change the patterns and create it so there is no box.
Mm-hmm. It's like I tell people who already have kids, if you have kids, it's okay. You can still do the healing work. Do the healing work because now your kids are actually seeing you do it. Okay. So by them seeing you do the healing work and seeing you, change into that beautiful, butterfly. And the butterfly I'm thinking about is a monarch butterfly for some reason, because I'm looking at you, Lori. But they're seeing you blossom into this beautiful monarch butterfly. And so by them seeing you, they're going to feel more comfortable with you when they're dealing with the same mess that you dealt with. They're going to feel comfortable going to you and asking, okay, mama, how did you do this? Because this is driving me batshit crazy. And for those of us who don't have kids, This is the prime, but you want kids. This is the prime time to start healing. Start healing all of that stuff. Because once you healed it, it's not going to your kids because you already healed it. So you just eradicated that one of many quote unquote, what do you want to say, generational curses, where do you want to say whatever lingo you want to go with. You just eradicated it. So I tell people all the time, always do your healing work. Always do the shadow work. Always ask yourself whys, whats, hows, whens. Always ask yourself that, because that's how you're going to heal. And like I said, for people who have kids, whether you have kids or not, that's how you're going to be able to raise your kids in a whole new light.
I'm like wanting to have this conversation forever, but we're gonna have to wrap it up now. I'm like, we could talk for a full day, the three of us.
Yes.
Well, we'll definitely do this again, but this was so much fun.
I'm getting used to being on camera.
Yeah.
I'm getting there. So this is helping me out.
Yeah.